Om Teshwari Namaha. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see some of the people have stayed, and I hope you find the discussion interesting and thought-provoking. A lot of the problems on the field, the ground has actually been set by the previous speakers, by you, by Madam Sunita, and by Dr. Prema. So it makes my talk easier and shorter, so you can be happy about that. But what I'll do is not so much follow what exactly we did, but I'm going to throw some problems out and then show you how we kind of address those problems. It should cover almost all the topics and the issues that were raised by Sunita ma'am, and some of the things, there are some overlaps, but in a slightly different scenario, I think you'll be able to appreciate the nuances quite well. I think most of our audience here is educated and interested in this topic. So one of the points that Madam had brought about is aspirations. And I think all of us who have worked in the field, this is probably the first hurdle we face is aspirations. How do we get people to want to learn? How do we get them to want to learn the right thing, or at least what we think is the right thing, and then figure out what they think about it and get everything to match somehow? And so how do we create this atmosphere of learning? And that's probably the first challenge that we face on the field. And so usually we go to the field and we, of course, talk to the people, and there's actually a very nice multidisciplinary way of approaching this problem, and many stakeholders within Amrita University actually participate. For example, every year, a group of students from the MBA school, especially from Coimbatore, will go to the field and they study the local area. They find out what are the needs, the demands, what is the industries that are around, and they kind of combine it into a comprehensive report, and the report comes back to us. And that is a good database for us to start our work with. We also go and we take a look at the local problems. What we first do is try and get the villagers to understand what their capacities are and how they fit into their surroundings. So we have a series of exercises where we work with the villagers, especially we work with women. And so we get the women to first understand their environment, their surroundings, and what it is that they would really like to do. Now, sometimes this backfires, and oftentimes when we go to a village and we ask young girls, what do you want to do? And the answer is, we want to become Bollywood dancers. Wrong answer. Like, you don't want them to become Bollywood dancers. So it's not just matching aspirations, but also creating aspirations. So you have to have them understand where they are and what is the scope around them, not limiting the scope, but giving them a really broader vision. We also understand what is behind them wanting to be a Bollywood dancer. There is something deeper in that than just becoming a Bollywood dancer. You help them understand what and where that aspiration comes from, and then translate it into something that they can learn together, that they would want to learn. At the same time, giving a huge boost to what vocational education stands for, giving it a little bit of a glamorous take on things. And so that's kind of the approach that we have. And there are some of the photographs of the different interventions that you have. You let the people watch a lot of different videos on various topics, engage them in conversations on what that video means to them, have them do exercises together and mapping out what their vulnerabilities are, what their resources are, how exactly they would visualize their village or their circumstance to be, map it with their aspirations currently. Do they have the resources to build their ideal village? And then get them to sign up on something that they mutually agree on. Yes, this is something that we can do, we can learn, and we can build on what we can learn. And that's where we start the education from. So once we've got all these wonderful women signed up to learn something new and do something with it. Okay, so then how are we going to teach them? So the huge thing is, where are the teachers? Now, you're talking about really rural villages. Now, why villages? Madam addressed the biggest chunk of India is still in her villages. The biggest chunk of people to be trained is in the vocational sector, and that's why we're focusing this talk on that area. But where are the teachers? Anybody who knows how to do something is in the town. They're making money there, and they're not going to come back to a village and train women. Because the amount of money that you get in actually doing a vocational skill is probably far higher than if you were going to train a bunch of people. How are we going to train people? So yes, ICT for vocational education or ICT for education is one of the big topics that is really being talked about in the UN, and it's actually mentioned very clearly in the SDGs as one of the points. But when you talk about ICTs in education, especially vocational education, there's a huge amount of effort that goes into it, creating content for vocational education. And in a country like India, where even the structure and there have been multiple structures for vocational education, and as Madam said, there has been a very consolidated effort to bring all these structures together in some comprehensive way where you can actually move up. You can keep upskilling in small increments, which actually makes it much easier. So creating the content that kind of fits into this kind of a structure is one challenge. Finding the experts to create the content is another challenge. Dumbing down the content, so to speak, in a way that people with low literacy levels can understand and comprehend and pick up and translate is another level. Vocational skills have a hands-on component, so how do you also bring in the hands-on component when you don't have an infrastructure to train people is another component. So all these challenges just makes vocational training far more exciting. And that's the exciting challenge that Amachi Labs has taken up. And so, but even if you did create all this ICT-based education, how are you going to put it in the field and how are you going to get it to work? It doesn't work like hole in the wall. And there is proof that you can't just put a computer there and get people to figure out how to use it and how to learn from it. No, you still have to create an atmosphere of teaching and learning from even if you use technology. And so part of the quest is how do you design that perfect teaching learning environment using technology. So technology is just one part of it. How do you facilitate the people coming into this area where you can actually create like a teaching learning environment? How do you get people who have some expertise come in and give the input as and when they need it? How do you create local within the group, within the learning group, how can you create teachers, which is something that Dr. Strauss will talk about, to kind of take in the knowledge and then kind of spread it, disseminate it within the group. How do you get people to stick to learning? Creating aspiration and getting them to join a course is one thing. How do you get them to stay with learning? That stickiness factor of learning is yet another thing. And these all kind of come together in creating this environment of teaching and learning. And so the different things that we have done, we have experimented with the lab. I think most of the things have worked very well. Sometimes they don't work, and then we keep changing our approach. What we figured is there's no one sure way of doing something. So each place offers a different challenge, and therefore we have multiple solutions. But here are some of the solutions that we use. We use them in different, we use variations of the same thing. So we have facilitators. Like what Prema had mentioned, we have women who are ambassadors, and they actually motivate the local women to come and learn. They hold the classes together. We have a huge component of what we call life skills training. Life skills training is maybe about human trafficking, but it also could be accessing government resources, government funds, advocacy. How do you actually mobilize incentives that are there, that are used? Like Madam said, there are so many seats that were available for the apprenticeship program, but so few takers. But people don't know about it. So how do you get people to know about it and then avail government schemes? How do you get people to have a good understanding of the environment and why we need to protect it? These are all things that come under life skills, and that really we found has what creates the cohesiveness and the stickiness for learning. It engages people and keeps them engaged. And what happens is you create that community is what keeps people going. And it's actually amazing to see that the number of dropouts that we have had in our vocational training has been less than 12%, with a national average of dropouts being anywhere between 30 to 70%. So that was a huge. I think the claps should go to the people who are in the field who have been tirelessly working on that. So this kind of community engagement really keeps people learning the whole time, and of course the the digital content created by the content team is something that is so high quality. So you know that whatever people are learning, they're learning it really well. And of course, a subject matter expert always comes in and clears doubts and helps them with their actual hands-on things. So for example, an example of the work that was done with this is that we know that sanitation is a huge problem in India. We have the highest rate of open defecation in the country. But people don't want to use toilets. Even if you build a toilet for them, they don't want to use it. They convert it into a storeroom, or they don't use it. And sometimes they even worship the room and they just won't use it. And so how do you create the culture of not of open defecation free, or anyway. So the whole the idea was to get women to become champions of sanitation. And so we started off with life skills, created the need for people to want sanitation in their houses, got them to learn masonry, learn plastering, and build their own toilets so they know how to maintain it. And most of these women were agricultural laborers, so they would, when they were not working on the farms, they were probably working at a local construction site carrying just bricks and sand and earning minimum wages. But now they were skilled to be plastering people, professionals, and masons. And with that, they can get about 3 times what they were earning as unskilled labor. And also just the fact that they have actually learned a skill was so empowering. And we've had so many women either start jobs, and some very interesting thing is some of them actually started their own brick making industries, where they started making bricks and selling it to other people who needed to do construction within the village. So it's quite a few interesting stories from that. So you can set up a training center, all these ad hoc training centers, create the atmosphere for learning, but how do you manage those centers? It's kind of the same challenge that Prema was talking about. Not just in terms of whether people are attending it. Vocational skills is not, it's a more long-term venture, in the sense usually the classes take about anywhere between 3 months to maybe 6 months to a year to learn a trade, to get women who are already working in something else to come and stay and learn consistently. These are all things that you need to monitor the subject matter expert. So we have also monitoring software that we have built as a part of the content delivery platform. So the content that is built, the digital content that is built, is delivered through a platform. The same platform also does the monitoring and evaluation. It's an online-offline model, so whenever there's connectivity, it connects and pushes the information to the net. And when there's no connectivity, it serves it and stores the information in the local server. Yeah, I was just thinking if there's another point. And all the women are trained to use all technology, the kind of technologies that we use, WhatsApp, Facebook, to post what they have done, what they have achieved. And this is a good incentive for them. And using technology is a great incentivizer. It's like a carrot, and people are so happy. It adds a huge amount to the aspiration quotient. And so, yes, so what would be the perfect amount of time that somebody would want to spend on a computer? How much time do you need to teach them life skills? How much time would you have them do things in the world? So getting that formula right. One is at what portions do you have to do, and how do you time it? Do you do your theory lectures first? Do you do your practicals next? Do you do your practicals first and theory next? These are all things, questions that we have battled with. We have tried, retried, and kind of come up with our, I would say, the Anamachi Lab's way of doing women empowerment and training. And this is our basic findings, that we know that we can have, that ICT does offer quality training, and it can be scalable. There's a lot of reduced dependency on subject matter experts. Our content is translated into multiple languages, and so it can be used all across India. Because it is available in laptops and in tablets, and even in mobile phones, you can actually access it anywhere. There is a lot of performance improvements. Even in the subject matter experts, they tend to do better because the video lectures that are there are very good quality, and so it kind of forces even the subject matter experts to do better than what they would do if they didn't have that. There's an overall reduction in training costs because Because of multiple reasons, reduced dependency on tools and materials and on the subject matter expert, and you're not restricted to having a very fixed infrastructure. We've often had classes under trees. And also, you can keep learning. A lot of times the women that we teach will come back for another course, It creates that thirst in learning. So whether they are either upskilling or they are multi-skilling, they are always wanting to learn. And I'm going to kind of skip this slide. But before I finish, I want to talk about the relevance of this. Madam said something very important. It was important to skill people in their places. And that's why these interventions become very critical, not necessarily bring them away somewhere and then teach them. And this doesn't have relevance only to India. You can think beyond India, and you can think about how the world has a huge global refugee crisis with Syria, what's happening in Germany and the Eastern and the European countries. There's a whole problem about assessing what people's skills are and giving them skills to manage in the new areas that they have. This is like a very big issue. And so using ICT for education and creating spaces within a country or a community that can start off teaching new skills is something that has relevance way beyond our boundaries. And I think as action leaders and thought leaders on this subject, I think what we're doing here has impact not just for what our country needs, but also for what the world needs. And yes, apart from our work with women and women empowerment and vocational training and life skills, we have also, because a part of vocational skills also involves developing simulators for physical skill training, and which usually involves robotics. A lot of our work has been involved in building robotic simulators, and that made us realize that the future of the world is also going into robotics and automation. So that's one critical area that we need to look into and focus. And so we've also ventured into teaching robotic skills to adolescents and young people in villages, and with some very interesting results. So we have a combination of workshops that involves 21st century skills, and we teach basically anybody who wants skills. And so far the programs have been going on very well, and we have an official MOU with the state of Andhra Pradesh, where we have started and we will be training the children in their village schools on 7 different skills, which include life skills, vulnerability mapping, computational thinking, robotics, and makers, which is part of the Make in India campaign. And these programs we have tremendous potential, and we are very excited about the work that is in front of us. And we hope to make India proud, ma'am, and use the guidelines that the Niti Aayog sets to design our future interventions. Thank you.